Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to the next video of the AWS for IT Auditors course. In this video, we're going to review AWS S3, which is the simple storage service. If you're interested in signing up for the course, please check out the video description below. Alright, so to kick things off, we're going to go into S3 from the console. So I'm going to type in S3 in the search bar here, and I'm going to click on S3, which is scalable storage in the cloud. And in this video, we're just going to review a couple buckets, and buckets are a way to store various files. Think of it like a shared drive in the cloud. So we're going to go through a couple buckets to kind of show how they're configured, and we'll go from there. So first I'm going to click on bad bucket 54321. And then just to show what this is about, I'm going to go to properties here. And I'm going to scroll down and show you a couple things that are good and a couple things that are bad with this bucket. The first thing I want to point out is our tags. So tags are a fundamental way that you can track resources in the cloud. So this bucket might be the bad bucket, but it does have decent tags. So it has an owner tag that has the value IT audit guy, a description tag, and that's to try to explain what the buckets can be used for. I just made up a funny fake reason for the description here, and then it has a classification for confidential. So you can apply any tag you want, but it's just a way to label what's in a bucket and help you understand, what's in there and what level of precautions need to be taken. The next thing I want to show is the default encryption. One thing to note is that as of January 2023, you cannot turn off default encryption. So that was a huge win from AWS that everything is encrypted. But I'll show you anyway because there is the possibility that if your bucket was created before January 2023, that your buckets could not be encrypted. So here we have the option of using an Amazon managed key, that's that SSE S3, or we have the option of using the AWS KMS, so that's a way that you can customize your keys, and it's definitely preferred for more secure environments. But for here, we're just using the AWS managed key, and then you can add some different bucket keys stuff, but that is the encryption, so I'm going to cancel out of there. The next thing I want to point out is that server access logging is disabled, so there's no logging of what's happening in this bucket. So yeah, that is pretty much it that we'll cover in this section here, but that is the properties. The next thing I want to go over is the permissions. And one thing Amazon does a great job of is warning you that this bucket is not well configured, and we'll kind of go through that here. But the first thing you can see is that it has that big caution saying it's public and it's publicly accessible. So hopefully you can kind of get the picture that this is not a well-configured bucket, but Amazon does do a pretty good job of letting you know. The next thing that's really badly configured with this bucket is that it's not blocking all public access. So, if your bucket was well configured, you'd have that, hopefully turned on and it'd be blocking all public access. That's not the case here, and that's why you can see the red, kind of that same caution with the off. So to get into more of the details, I want to walk through the bucket policy and what this means. So bucket policies are JSON files that describe how access is granted to the bucket. So this is a bucket policy here, and I'll just kind of read this in a way to try to make sense of it. So what this is doing is the effect is allowing anybody on the internet the ability to get objects from this bucket. So just to reiterate that right here, the star is anyone. So it's not like someone you could specify that down to an AWS account, or you could specify it down to a certain IAM user, anything here, but this star is saying anyone is allowed to get object from this bucket. So really not a safe configuration, especially if you have confidential data in this bucket, which based on the tags, that's what we have in here. So a pretty bad bucket policy overall, but that is kind of the walkthrough there of what a bucket policy is. The next thing that I wanted to show are the ACLs here. So that is a access control list, and ACLs actually predate bucket policies. So I think in an ideal world, you shouldn't use ACLs. You should actually use the bucket policies. But I wanted to show these here because it still does have, you could still have a bucket with ACLs enabled. So in here, I just want to point out that it has this list. So it's everyone on the internet can list all the objects and can read the bucket ACL. So just not a good practice. But yeah, you don't like to see that. Kind of gives you the caution, the red here, of that they can list the objects and read the bucket ACL. So not a great well set up bucket. The next thing I want to show is the objects. So if we go into the objects and we go into this licenses folder, and if you remember from the properties, it says that it's storing, fake driver's license. If you go into the licenses folder, and then you click on the McLovin license here, it'll show that it knows that we have an object that's 1.2 megabytes. It's a PNG file. And if we click on this URL, and I'm just going to open this up in a new tab, you can actually see that I was able to, just from the internet, go access what's in that bucket. So, if somebody had the ability to, find, your bucket name, so that's your bucket name here, and then they have the ability to know what some of these file names are, you could extract all this, and I could, there's nothing stopping me from downloading this. If this was a real license, you'd have a problem for sure. So that is because of the bucket permissions and because that bucket is public, you're able to just copy and paste that URL, and anyone in the world can go look at this this object here if they'd like to. So that is the bad bucket 54321. I want to quickly show a bucket that's better configured, and there's always improvements you can make and all that kind of stuff, but I wanted to show you this AWS CloudTrail logs. And for those of you who don't know, CloudTrail is a logging service within AWS that logs all of the activity in AWS. So if I create a new IAM user, CloudTrail logs that. If I create a new bucket, CloudTrail logs it. So it's something that you want to keep, very safe and secure. So we'll kind of do the same thing here of looking at the properties. And you can see that this has the owner and the engineering, the description that it stores CloudTrail logs, and the data classification. So that is the tags. It also has that Amazon S3, so it's like AWS managed keys, kind of what that means here. And then it does not have server access logging. I definitely should probably turn that on, but just kind of for this example, you could definitely have that enabled, and then you'd know if someone is deleting objects or anything like that. You'd want to know. Another just kind of caveat is that in an ideal setup, your CloudTrail logs wouldn't even be in the same account as your production environment. You actually can have a logging account, but that's a more advanced setup. But just wanted to kind of put that out there that this is definitely not the perfect setup. But if we go over to the permissions here, I want to quickly show why this bucket is better than the bad bucket that I previously showed here. First, you can see it doesn't have that red, public access here. That was bad news. So it says the bucket and objects are not public. We have all this, the green block public access is on, which is great. And I want to quickly show this bucket policy. And if you remember, we had that, it was the allow star and get object. So I wanted to quickly kind of explain this one just so you can get some reps at looking at what these might be. So I'm actually going to go down into the CloudTrail right. So what this is doing is it's allowing and then it's allowing the service, and that service is CloudTrail Amazon. So it's allowing CloudTrail to put new objects, to write objects to this bucket, and it actually specifies down to the folder that you're allowed to write objects to. So this couldn't, it couldn't write into this folder, it can only write into this folder, and I'll show that over here in a second. But this is saying it can put objects, it can't get objects, it can't delete objects, it can just put objects into that bucket. And then this allows to get bucket ACLs. So that is just a little different, much more least privilege compared to the other one that was just opening it up to the internet. And then the ACLs here, this is kind of the standard ACL. And yeah, nothing really to see here. But those are two buckets, and I'll just kind of show the objects here just so you can kind of get familiar of the AWS logs. And so on the course you might not be able to see this because of how it's configured, but you can see that it's writing to, and this is that folder, that anything in this folder CloudTrail's allowed to write to. So then it could write to, it's broken down by AWS region, and it can put new objects in here, but based on those permissions, it cannot delete objects or anything. So that is a better configured bucket compared to our bad bucket, 54321. So yeah, that's it for this video. That was a quick overview of AWS S3. The key takeaway is that each bucket is basically a file folder or a shared drive and needs to be configured correctly in order to keep your company's data safe. That's it for this video. If you got value out of the video, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, please comment below. Thanks all. Happy auditing.